Is America stalling in Iran? Is Israel pushing Trump more than he wants to be pushed? And what on earth is going on in Europe? I'm Lembit Opik. This is Lembit Opik Live as we look at what could be a Persian meltdown.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. Boring. Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
Remember what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome. Once again, I'm Lembit Opik here on Lembit Opik Live on Unprecedented TV. Before we go any further, please do like and subscribe. Go to @Unprecedented TV and join the thousands of people who have already done that. It costs you nothing, takes 30 seconds, and you'll have access to the full gamut of hundreds and hundreds of shows all on the archive. And you can go back and look to see how accurate we've been. We've had a 90% plus accuracy rate in terms of the predictions we've made since we first came on air almost a year ago. So hopefully that's fairly good evidence that you'll get sensible predictions rather than hubris or propaganda here. We do express our opinions as well, of course, but we don't dress them up as facts, which is more than you can say for much of the mainstream media we seek to replace. Anyway, we're talking today about what could be a Persian meltdown. I'm not talking about the temperature in weather terms. I'm talking about the temperature in political and military terms. As you've doubtless noticed, Iran is being pummeled by US and Israeli forces as they seek to bring that regime, as they call it, to its knees. They originally said they wanted regime change, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the premier in Israel, still uses that kind of language. But it seems that the American president, Donald Trump, has moved away from that sort of lingo. Nobody really knows exactly what his military objective is. And he has been criticized for that, because if you don't know what you're fighting to achieve, how do you know if you've achieved it? Others say this is smart tactics, because when the going gets tough, the tough can simply up and leave. In other words, Donald Trump can claim a victory without being all that specific and walk away, leaving the military baby in the hands of the Gulf states, which potentially is a problem, which we'll talk about on the show. So who's right? Who's winning? Was this military gambit a good idea from a president who promised no more foreign wars? Well, let's speak to somebody who's never knowing the undersold in terms of his insights and views. It's Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. Marcus, thanks for joining us today. Big picture question here. Who's winning?
As it currently stands, Lembit, Iran has the upper hand. Yes, Iran is being pounded by America and Israel, but at the same time, Iran is pounding Israel and pounding American military bases in the Persian Gulf. If we take Tel Aviv, for example, much of the city is either damaged or lies in ruins. And then we have the American military bases. Most of the radars have been destroyed. Much of the infrastructure has been either damaged or destroyed. And coupled together with that is this: Iran, for some 4 decades, has designed and manufactured tens of thousands of missiles, perhaps well in excess of 100,000 missiles. And even though Iran is at war today, Iranian armament factories, which are devilishly concealed inside impenetrable places deep inside of mountains, are producing on a daily basis missiles along with drones. The Iranian economy is large and robust and has an infinite amount of oil and gas, meaning the Iranian armed forces can continue to prosecute their war against America and Israel. But can America and Israel continue economically and militarily to prosecute their war against Iran? Well, I submit to you, as I have submitted from day one of the war, that Iran is winning and Iran will emerge victorious.
That's quite a challenging analysis, and not one which we tend to hear very much in the West. The argument certainly is agreed upon that Israel and the United States have incomparably greater military might. But the part that really intrigues me in what you're saying is something which I've been suggesting, I have to say, but I don't hear very much on television. As long as the Iranian existing administration can survive, they win. That's because if regime change was the challenge, if that was the mission objective and they don't achieve regime change, then America hasn't achieved its core goal. And let's remember, it was Donald Trump who talked about regime change, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. I think a lot of the miscalculation of Iranian military capabilities and Iranian resolve stems from the demonization of Iran and the Iranian people following the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Because ever since then, in America and in Britain, the populations of both countries have been subjected to ferocious propaganda about Iran. Iran has been presented as a wasteland inhabited by barbarians who live in tents, who, as Donald Trump recently said, cut babies' heads off and cut women in two. So now that Iran occupies the upper hand in this war, many people in America and in Britain are startled. They cannot understand how this is possible. And as I said, it stems from the propaganda. It stems from how Iran and the Iranian people have been demonized for 47 years now. And on top of that, the Americans and the Israelis have not only underestimated Iranian military capabilities, they have overestimated their own military capabilities. So, for example, when it comes to the Israeli military, yes, elements of it remain formidable, but they are not invincible. Ever since 2006, the Israeli political and military leadership have been of the opinion that Israel cannot beat Hezbollah. Again, Hezbollah are presented in the Western world as barbarians living in tents in the desert. The reality is very different. Hezbollah, and I'm talking about the military wing of the Hezbollah movement, Hezbollah is, for all intents and purposes, a conventional army, and quite a formidable conventional army. That is why the Israeli military invasion of southern Lebanon has once again stalled, because the Israeli army has come up against Hezbollah. So there are numerous explanations to explain why the American and Israeli military strategy employed against Iran has thus far been an abject failure. And there is no evidence to suggest that it will be anything but an abject failure.
That's quite a strong statement. Here's some. These are pictures, I believe, of the Iranian military. The pictures themselves don't tell us a huge amount, but it does seem very likely that the Iranians aren't anything like as diminished in their fighting power, in my opinion, as has been portrayed in the uninformed Western media. One piece of evidence for this is that if you're watching this live, the Iranians have made it quite clear that they are not interested in a ceasefire. this tends to back up what you're saying, that they don't want to have to come back and do it all again. It also seems from what the Iranian spokesman said that they just wouldn't believe a ceasefire, because they've been told beforehand that we're in negotiations, America and Iran in negotiations seem to be going well, and suddenly they get pounded. And I'm wondering what you make of this rejection of a ceasefire at the time of broadcast.
Well, it clearly demonstrates that the Iranian political and military leadership are very aware that they have the upper hand in this war. And simultaneously, there is no reason for them to enter into dialogue with the Americans, because the Americans cannot be trusted. No different to how, if, for example, NATO was to put into writing that it will never allow Ukraine to be admitted to its membership. The Kremlin attaches no importance to verbal or written promises coming from NATO, or indeed from NATO's patrons, not first and foremost America and then Britain, because the Americans, along with NATO, have a long history of violating agreements, of violating treaties, and returning to Iran. Why would the Iranians trust a word that comes from the Americans, be it verbally or in writing? So that is why we hear from, for example, the Iranian foreign minister, that Iran has rejected proposals by Trump to enter into negotiations, and that Iran will decide when and how the war ends. Iran is a very large country in geographical terms. Iran has a population of just over 90 million. The Iranian people, be it Muslims, be it Christians, be it those who follow the religion during the times of the Persian empires, are ferociously patriotic. They are extremely pious. They are extremely conservative in social terms, and they will stop at nothing to defend their country. Again, even Iranians inside of Iran who oppose Iranian government policies are now standing shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian government. Why? Because they are doing so in defense of Iran, because never, ever do the Iranian people want to see Iran return to how it was during the days of the Shah, namely a colony of America and Britain's, whereby Iran was humiliated, where Iran was dictated to, where Iran was pillaged, and where Iranian society, which, as I said, is very pious and very conservative, was subjected to Western values, which amount to nothing more than decadence. So that is why Iran has the upper hand, because of their military power and because the Iranian people are united, just how they were united following Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran, which of course was backed by America and Britain, along with other countries such as France.
The Americans, it must be said, managed to decapitate the leadership. That's the new leader. They did kill the Ayatollah Khomeini. And then Trump's gone on to say, just for fun, Trump warns of more Iran strikes. Just for fun, he said. I wonder how wise that kind of language is. For the reason that you say, I haven't been to Iran during this period, obviously. But it bothers me because I think that you make a really interesting point. The revolution in 1979 was not imposed by an external force. It was spontaneously created internally to repel an external force. The Shah of Iran had to leave in a bit of a hurry because the Ayatollah Khomeini and those groups basically had popular support. I wonder if there's been a big own goal here, Marcus, where even those, as you said yourself, who aren't really that keen on the current administration would still prefer it to what they perceive to have been the dark days half a century ago.
The problem stems from the early 1950s when the Americans and the British overthrew the then Shah of Iran and replaced him with a pro-Western Shah, who would then be overthrown by the Iranian people in 1979. But from the early 1950s all the way through to 1979, that Shah, who was put into power by Washington and London, made Iran a playground for the Americans and the British. During those years, Iran lost its national pride. Iran lost its dignity. Following the Iranian Revolution, Iran was returned to the Iranian people. Now, can the Iranian government of today, and ever since the Iranian Revolution, can the Iranian government be brutal? Yes, it can. But so too can every other government in the world. Let us not forget that the British state, using its political police force, year in, year out, arrests a vast amount of Britons for simply expressing opinions about their country on social media. The British state has also been implicated in the Epstein files, namely the rape of little girls and little boys. So, yes, the Iranian government can be brutal. Yes, the Russian government can be brutal. And so too can the British government, and so too can the American government. But also, the Saudi government can be exceptionally brutal. Yet, there is no talk from America, there is no talk from Britain or Israel about the Saudi regime. No, they refer to the Saudi government as the Saudi government. They don't talk about overthrowing the Saudi monarchy, because let us not forget, at the scene of every Islamist terrorist attack in the Western world, from New York to London to Madrid, and indeed outside of the Western world to Bali, there are numerous signposts, one of which points to Riyadh. Saudi Arabia is one of the main exporters of Islamist terrorism, specifically Wahhabist terrorism. Wahhabism is the official ideology of Saudi Arabia, and yet there is no talk from America or Britain or Israel of bringing freedom to the Saudi people and bringing democracy to the Saudi people.
Stay with us, hold that thought. I'm Lembit Opik here on Lembit Opik Live at Unprecedented TV. Please do like and subscribe. I'm talking with Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos about the circumstances in Iran and around it, whether the United States and Israel can defeat Iran, what are their mission objectives, and after the break, we're going to talk about what the United Kingdom is considering its role, and if we've got time, maybe a little bit about France too. In the meantime, let's have a look at Claire Dyer's great show, Dire Consequences, as she finds local issues with national relevance. She gives voice to the voiceless. That's Dave Dyer, one of the absolute stalwarts of at Unprecedented TV. Please do like and subscribe, and you'll find her entire back catalogue right there on YouTube. But back to Marcus Papadopoulos, the story so far. Neither Marcus nor myself thinks it's the cleverest idea to take on Iran. I think that's fair to say. The argument is that Iran only has to survive in terms of its administration to win. And it's not clear what Donald Trump's exit strategy is. It's got to be said, though, Marcus, there's enormous firepower being thrown at the Iranians at the moment. You got B-52s, these enormous bombers. There's one, in fact, taking off from RAF, and I believe that one. And these massive things can carry over 30 tons of weapons, and they use them as standoff platforms. In other words, they get close to Iran and then they fire these cruise missiles, which seem to be pretty accurate most of the time, though it also seems likely they've actually killed over 165 children, girls in a school. With this massive firepower, let's get this question out of the way. Is there any prospect that Iran will be forced into submission on the basis of the sheer pummeling they're going to get, a little bit like Iraq in both of the Iraqi in both of the Iraq wars, early 19? What do you think, Marcus?
No war can be won by simply an air campaign. The Iranian government will not be forced to do anything unless, of course, it is overthrown. And the Iranian government will only be overthrown or potentially overthrown should there be an American land invasion of Iran. Yes, Iran is being pounded on a daily basis by the Americans and the Israelis. And as always, the Americans and the Israelis are terror bombing Iran. Their main focus is inflicting maximum casualties on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Exactly what NATO did in 1999 when it bombed the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. So the Americans and the Israelis are focusing mainly on civilians and civilian infrastructure in the hope that this will encourage the Iranian people to take to the streets and overthrow the Iranian government. Well, that will not happen. So air power alone does not win wars. Air power will not bring down the Iranian government and will not bring the Iranian government to the negotiating table. The Iranian government, for some 4 decades, prepared for this day, namely war with America. Iran is an extremely mountainous country, which means many military installations, many other sensitive installations, which are absolutely vital to Iran's ability to defend itself and to go on the offensive, are deep inside of mountains, which are impenetrable, So I reiterate, air power cannot win a war. Only a land invasion could bring that about. Now, I've been saying on television, Lembit, ever since this war against the Iranian people began, that first and foremost, the Americans will not proceed with a land invasion because that would be catastrophic. But I said if they were to, it would require between 300,000 and 500,000 American soldiers. Well, a senior American army officer whom I know has said to me that whilst he agrees with my military analysis, he believes that the Americans would need close to 1 million soldiers to invade Iran. Why? Not just because of the sheer size of the country, not because of the sheer resistance it would experience from the Iranian military and the Iranian paramilitaries, but also guerrilla warfare from ordinary Iranians, for example, in mountains. So my American Army officer friend has said that there will not be a land invasion, but hypothetically speaking, they would need more than what I said, 500,000 soldiers. They would need close to 1 million men.
Let's have a look at Tehran, and this is one of my favorite pictures, if we can get that up. This is Tehran, the capital city, and you tend to think, because of the way that Iran is described as a dust bowl, Bedouins or camel nomads, that it would be a particularly poor place. There we are. That's snow. That's snow on mountains, which go up to, I think, 18,500 feet, roughly 6,000 meters. That's not going to be easy. That's like trying to invade the Alps, but bigger. And you're saying they've built things inside those mountains?
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. And they are impenetrable. The Americans, for example, and the British mainstream media, for example, can drone on about B-52s. Well, yes, B-52s are very impressive aircraft, but they can't penetrate deep inside of those mountains, which Iran has. That is why, Lembit, Iran is not just successfully defending itself. That is why Iran has inflicted massive devastation on Israel, massive devastation on American military bases.
I want to pick up on that. You did actually say that there's a terror bombing campaign going on in Iran by the West, by Israel and America, but the numbers still are comparatively low. I'm often surprised by how low the actual casualties are. We're talking about thousands, a few thousand, which is terrible if you're one of those victims. But we're not hearing the figures that you're saying. We're not hearing of that devastation in Tel Aviv and in Israel. Surely they couldn't conceal it if it was happening.
Well, what I'm about to say is not a secret. It is in the public domain. The Israeli government are enforcing a very strict media ban inside of Israel. They have prohibited photographs and footage of the devastation that Iranian missiles have brought about in all parts of Israel. What, however, we see is that there are Iranian civilians who, at great risk to their civil liberties, have taken photographs, have made videos of the attacks by Iran day and night, 7 days a week. These photographs and these videos clearly demonstrate the carnage that Israel is incurring all across the country. So again, Iran is being attacked by a military superpower, America. They are going to incur great losses, but Iran is a very powerful country. People simply don't understand Iran. They don't understand the mindset of the Iranian people. The Iranians are taken to the streets in all of the major cities and indeed in towns all across Iran, and they are showing their solidarity. And even though American and Israeli missiles are flying over their heads, they are not running for cover, because Iranians are not like Americans. They're not like Britons. They do not have fear. They fear one thing and one thing only, God. And for them to die for God, to die for Iran, is an absolute blessing, if need be. If need be.
It's worth noting, and I covered in an earlier show, I'm not sure if we can get a picture of the KC-135 tankers up, but there has been some significant damage to some rather expensive aircraft. Yeah, there they are. Tanker fleet. Five US Air Force KC-135s out of action after Saudi air raid strikes. That adds to two other ones, one of which was damaged in flight, another one which crashed with the loss of all 6 crew. The claim by the Americans is that those two collided in midair, but there's a certain amount of skepticism in the aeronautical world about that. Others think it's more likely one was shot down and some of the shrapnel hit the other one, which survived. That's expensive. That kind of damage usually comes to millions. So it's quite obvious that there has been quite a lot of damage to Western resources. I just want to have a quick chat, though. We're moving on very quickly. I know there's slightly unfinished business, what we've been talking about there, but I'm trying to understand where the United Kingdom stands in all this. Keir Starmer's statement on Iran, it says here. I don't know what he's trying to say. Keir Starmer says Britain will not join offensive strikes in Iran, saying we remember the mistakes of, I think that says we remember the mistakes of, thank you, the mistakes of Iraq. Well, that was Keir Starmer's Labour Prime Minister predecessor, Tony Blair. I'm not sure they do remember that. I don't understand what the Keir Starmer's policy is, because first he said he didn't want Trump to use UK sites at all. Then he said that they could use it for defensive measures. But honestly, Marcus, defensive measures doesn't mean surely a 15-hour return bombing trip with the B-52, sending Tomahawks into Tehran. Is that defensive?
The situation is peculiar, but not inexplicable. Firstly, the British ruling elite despise Trump. The British ruling elite tried to sabotage Trump's presidency during his first term in office. So, putting aside Starmer is of no importance whatsoever. The British ruling elite, whilst they have no love for the Iranian government, whilst the British ruling elite would very much like to see Iran return to how it was during the days of the Shah, namely a colony of the West, the British ruling elite see this as an opportunity for Trump to destroy himself. The British ruling elite understand that an air campaign will not bring down the Iranian government. Only a land invasion of Iran could topple the Iranian government. The British ruling elite is extremely intelligent, and in my opinion, the most intelligent of all ruling elites in the world. So the British ruling elite will not permit Britain to join this war with America. The British ruling elite, to put it into simple English, thinks, let Trump hang himself. On the other, and at the same time, the British ruling elite will, of course, allow the American military to use British bases, British airspace, and, of course, the British military bases in the British overseas territories in Cyprus. That is part and parcel of the historic strategic friendship and partnership which exists between Washington and London. But for the British ruling elite, they see Trump's war as against Iran as an opportunity for Trump to destroy himself, for Trump to hang himself.
It seems, though, that in the process, there are special relationships that's been pretty badly destroyed. Thank you. There's a Starmer rejects Trump's threats after US President warns NATO faces very bad future. Senior cabinet minister Pat McFadden said Britain was not obliged to enter the US's war of choice and that the Iran conflict had nothing to do with the alliance. But this is what confuses me, Marcus. You must have said British ruling elite 20 times there, and yet the British ruling elite is allowing us to look like we're part of the war because tons of bombs have been loaded up on British soil and being dropped on Iranian soil. That feels like we're involved. We're sending HMS Dragon to chug across there, even if it's not going to make much difference. That does look like we're being dragged in.
Britain is involved in America and Israel's war against Iran. The British, as I said, have allowed the Americans to use British bases and British airspace to target Iran. They are also providing intelligence information and logistical information. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, as it currently stands, the British ruling elite will not go on the offensive with the Americans and the Israelis against Iran, because the British ruling elite understand it would be an exercise in futility. They know the Americans are not going to invade Iran. Therefore, they look at it as this. Well, what is Trump's objective? And what is his strategy for achieving whatever his objective is? As I said, they're sitting back in their chairs and they are thinking to themselves, let him hang himself. And that way we can get him out of the White House, and we can have someone who is one of us. And it can go back to how it was during the days of Bush or Clinton or Obama or Biden. For them, Trump is an aberration. And I'm not justifying Trump's behavior. He is now a major war criminal. He is in the same league as Bush Jr., as Clinton and Obama. But I am saying that whilst this situation concerning Britain is strange, it can be explained.
The headlines indicate the problem. For another day, I'll do a whole show on why you think he's actually a war criminal. It's a strong statement, and I hear the allegation, but we'll cover it another day because we haven't got very much time left. But Donald Trump's been really quite critical about the UK. US President Donald Trump says he's not happy with the UK after Keir Starmer said it would not be drawn into a wider war over Iran. Trump repeats his call for other nations to assist in securing the Strait of Hormuz after earlier warning it would be very bad for the future of NATO if allies don't help secure the key oil shipping route. But the German Chancellor, Merz, says the war isn't to do with NATO. He's been quite clear about that. Now, I was not happy with the UK. That's what Trump said. This could have very long-term consequences for the very relationship you're talking about. Or do you think the relationship can be repaired after Trump's time?
The latter. When Trump leaves office, and unless there is a true American patriot sitting in the White House, then it will be business as usual. And in regard to this special relationship, again, people don't really understand what it means. They think America and Britain, best of friends, it's an equal partnership. They are the defenders of democracy, freedom, and civilization in the world. Well, I won't digress, but in a nutshell, Lembit, the special relationship came about as a result of Roosevelt telling Churchill that America will only join the Second World War if Britain surrenders the pound's leading position in the world and makes way for the dollar. And then after the Second World War, the Americans again said to Churchill, you will only, and then of course to Attlee, you will only receive loans if the British Empire stands down and makes way for American dominance in the world. So in light of that, which are historical facts, what exactly is the special relationship? The Americans humiliated the British Empire at the start of the Second World War. They humiliated the British Empire at the end of the Second World War. These are truths which a lot of British people are not aware about. And I'm perfectly happy for people to like Churchill, but at the same time, Churchill inflicted horrific damage on the British Empire and on Britain itself. So we need to have a discussion, not just about what the special relationship is and how it came about, but also about Churchill.
I feel an entire series coming on there. Nevertheless, we're sending this HMS Dragon vessel at enormous cost to Cyprus. Well, what's all that about? If we're not actually being dragged into it, because Trump's obviously trying to shove us into a position where we're doing an awful lot of a lot more than this to try to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. There is HMS Dragon chugging along, take days to get there. Why are we doing that then? Because it becomes a target as well. And it begins to be like a big neon sign saying, over here, over here.
It's a symbolic move. It's a way of Britain saying to the British people, saying to the American people that we have not abandoned our closest friend and our closest ally in the world. Is it a target? I don't believe it is. The Iranian government is very wise. It thinks strategically. The Iranian government is not going to attack a British vessel. It's not going to attack the British military bases in the British overseas territories in Cyprus, because then that would leave the British ruling elite with no choice but to become involved in an offensive context in America and Israel's war against Iran. So the Iranians are not going to attack that Royal Navy vessel, or indeed any other Royal Navy vessel. In regard to the 2 drones which attacked one of the British military bases in Cyprus, well, all of the evidence available, and indeed the British Ministry of Defence have confirmed this, that the drones came from Lebanon. And there's no point people saying that Iran controls Hezbollah. Iran does not control Hezbollah. Yes, they have some influence, but they do not control that.
Okay, last thing I wanted to ask you about was the Strait of Hormuz, because that seems to be literally a pinch point. It's 12 miles across, 20 kilometers. There it is. And what I've noticed, if you're watching this live, you'll know this to be the case. Iran's now said, you guys can go through, you countries can go through, and you guys can't. And I think that's a rather interesting tactic, because it's a divide and conquer. Iran's basically saying, we can be friends and you can have the oil, and we can't be friends and you can't have the oil. It seems to me this is one of the absolute massive strategic advantages that Iran has. Can they play that, or will they be too weak to enforce the threat?
Wars can be fought militarily, covertly, i.e. through intelligence, and also economically. The Iranians are fighting this war militarily. They are also fighting it economically. They are fighting very wisely because, as you said, they have said to countries that their vessels can pass through the Strait of Hormuz, providing they are not allowing their airspace, their maritime waters, or their land to be used by the Americans and the Israelis as part of their war against Iran. And at the same time, the Iranians are denying American oil tankers access to the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. That is having a very major impact on the American economy. And simultaneous to that, by the Iranians deciding who passes through the Strait of Hormuz, this is benefiting their strategic partner, namely Russia. Russia is the main economic winner from this war. So the Russians are providing military assistance to the Iranians in this war. They are providing logistical assistance. They are providing intelligence to the Iranians and political support, for example, at the United Nations. And in turn, the Iranians are enabling the Russians to make enormous profits at the end of each week, because so many countries in the world are now turning to Russia to be supplied with oil. I believe, Lembit, that something like just over 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And that is not happening now because Iran has closed it. And it's allowing certain countries to pass through, but not America. Therefore, the Russians are the main beneficiary from this. So the Russian-Iranian strategic partnership is paying dividends for both Moscow and Tehran.
Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, always a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for your insights. And no doubt we'll return to this. We've actually almost opened more questions than we've answered there. On another day, we'll look at the curious position of the French. We won't have time to do that now. My view is that there's a huge strategic game to be played. And as Dr. Papadopoulos has just said, this is an economic war that Iran is waging across the whole world, because your energy bills are going up, partly because of the ludicrous mismanagement of energy policy by the British government, which I think has done catastrophic damage. But within that, because oil prices have gone up, thanks to the essential closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We shall see how this plays out. I'll make one prediction, and this will be in the archive for months and years to come, that United States will not achieve the regime change that they have mentioned, they'll have to sue for peace in some way, claim a victory, whether or not they get one, and this will drag on much longer than the days or weeks that Donald Trump may have hoped. Please do have your comments as well. Very happy to engage with you on that. Go to @Lembit Opik. That's my X handle. And please do like and subscribe at Unprecedented TV on YouTube. I'm Lembit Opik. This was Lembit Opik Live on Unprecedented TV.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.